Much of our world's progress and well-being and health and thriving is enabled by business. That peace is the new sustainability.
Yes. So good to see you, my friend.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, I'm really excited about this conversation because we were talking the other day. We talked about your work, about peace and about business, and also the human constitution, about our human rights and human responsibilities. For the people who are watching this, would you please introduce yourself, Tilman?
So my name is Tilman Bauer. I am from Finland and Germany. I have an intercultural, international background. Always loved, live in, and experience different cultures. Peace is so much more than the absence of war. In fact, peace and war have, in my opinion, nothing to do with each other. I consider them entirely different elements. I compare them to fire and water, right? One is not the absence or the opposite of the other. They're entirely different elements. Studying peace or researching peace has become this fascinating, especially when applied to business. So that's what my research has been about. I did a PhD on business for peace, and now I'm commercializing that idea.
Wow. Okay, awesome. So how do you commercialize peace work?
You find out that the more ethical a company is, or the more ethically it operates, the more peace it generates. The more peace a company generates, the more financial income or profits or enterprise value it also generates for itself. Peace is the new sustainability. Over the last few decades, I think society has progressed and made some important steps in the right direction. Yet, I think the concept of sustainability is, after all, not able to deliver on its promise to make business a force for good. The expanded concept of peace solves that conceptual problem. Primarily a research based conclusion. It's business and peace. If you look at people like Adam Smith, Immanuel Kant, Montesquieu, and many other philosophers and economists who talked about business and peace in the same sentence hundreds of years ago, we forgotten about the inherent connection between business and peace. In the last 20, 30 years, modern academia has caught up. My contribution in my research has been to take this old topic and to build on the modern research, but to expand the concept of peace. Because if you look at studies on business and peace of the last 20 or 30 years, then they all consciously and explicitly define peace as negative peace, which is defined as the absence of war or the absence of physical violence. Concept of positive peace, which is the presence of positive ideals or values. It becomes, scientifically too difficult to control for, to do statistical analyses. But my research was philosophical, and I was not afraid to venture into this unknown field of combining mainstream business with the expanded concept of peace. And that's what brought the fascinating conclusions I mentioned. The problem with sustainability, conceptually, it's quite an empty word. It only means the ability to sustain something. But what is to be sustained is not included in the word itself. You can come up with your own interpretation of sustainability and what it means. And as I said earlier, this was and still is an important step in the right direction. But the problem is that there are conceptual problems related to it, because it does not give a clear and explicit guidance to what we are maximizing for. Right? And the concept of peace solves this. Now, to your question, how we can work with business and peace. Peace is measurable. This goes back to research done at Stanford University by my colleagues at the Stanford Peace Innovation Lab. And building on that research, I developed a business peace index, which essentially takes the expanded concept of peace and quantifies corporate peace impact on a scale from 0 to 100. I am selling this service to companies because I help companies to identify what their peace impact is. In other words, what their positive societal impact is. And then when we take that as a baseline and decide or discuss with the client where the company wants to be on a scale from 0 to 100. We can then define an action plan how to get there, which in turn leads to higher profits, higher financial profits for the company itself as well. After all, we are not talking about philanthropy. We are talking about business strategy that makes also business sense.
Tell me more about that Peace Business Index.
First of all, in terms of what's the point of the Business Peace Index? The mainstream business world, unfortunately, quite often tends to speak about reducing or minimizing negative impact. For instance, we try to minimize, I don't know, child labor or CO2 emissions or inequality and these things. A step in the right direction. But the problem is that all we are doing is being less bad. So if you have a scale from minus 100 to 0, then many of the sustainability indices, they define as the ultimate best we can get to as, not being bad. And I challenge that thinking by asking, how can we be instead more good and not just less bad? So the Business Peace Index focuses not on minus 100 to 0, but from 0 to plus 100. In other words, what is the, and my contribution has been to define the theoretical maximum, in other words, what 100 means. What is the theoretical maximum in terms of good that we can be? And now comes the crucial point, divided into 8 components. So the Business Peace Index consists of 8 components. The first one is purpose. And the purpose of the company, when you talk about the purpose of a company, there's the old answer or the traditional answer that still some people believe in, that, the business of business is business. This is a quote attributed to Milton Friedman, and it refers to this idea that profit maximization would be the only purpose of business. But today, we feel this cannot be the ultimate truth. So then, in my research, I asked, what are some alternative answers? My next research question was actually, what does positive impact actually mean? Again, just like sustainability, not that much, if anything at all, in terms of substance in the term itself. And this is again where the peace concept comes in. I define peace as the substance of any positive impact. Theory, which I've proven to be correct, that the purpose of business is to foster or generate peace, whereas profits, financial profits, are an enabler and, of course, a requirement of business, but not the purpose, but rather like a wonderful side effect. Of course, we all want to earn money. We all want to create profits, but that's not the purpose. That's a side effect. So the first component of the Business Peace Index quantifies your or a company's mindset related to its purpose. How does it interpret its mission or its purpose in society? If you as a company don't have any purpose whatsoever, and you say, what, my only purpose is to maximize profits, then for this particular component, you wouldn't get any points. And if you have this holistic mindset about really finding your company's role in society in terms of holistic peace contribution, then you get maximum points. And then crucially, we also need to define specific KPIs to operationalize the mission to day-to-day operations. So that's also part of the first component.
Okay, good. And the next one out of the 8.
Moving to the second component, which is time horizon. Does a company have, a quarterly mindset that we only maximize profits on a quarterly basis? Or do we really have a long-term vision, perhaps 30 years or even more, because we as a company want to build this legacy? We are not in it for the short term. We are in the game of business for the long term because we want to make contribution to making the world a better place. These are the two extremes of the second component.
Fantastic. And then the third one?
The third one is then products and services. So here we analyze the products and services of the company and assess whether they are fulfilling a human need. Do the products or services of the company address something that we as humans, as society, genuinely want and need, or is it something that would be better if it wouldn't exist, to put it simply?
Wow. And then the fourth out of the 8.
Fourth one is then ethics, morality. And here we then come to a question which I already touched upon beforehand. We are not talking anymore about how not to be unethical, but how to be ethical. Some companies write on their websites, we believe in moral excellence. We have high ethics. That's what they write, that's what they claim. And then when you kind of start analyzing what it means in practice, it tends to mean that they just want to be not too unethical, right? And not being unethical, or even not being too unethical, should be different from moral or ethical excellence.
Yeah.
So this component really digs deep into the question of, again, the scale from -100 to +100. What does being ethical mean other than not being unethical?
I love this. And tell me more about the next one.
Sure. The next one is then stakeholders. So every company has stakeholders, and we as society, I tend to talk a lot about this, we as society. What do I refer to? What do I mean by that? I think it's a good point to mention that. We as society, I'm referring to academic literature, to mainstream conversations in media. Explore what it might mean to shift the mindset of business from a shareholder primacy to a stakeholder primacy, or groups of people that are in some shape or form affected by the operations of a company. So that's employee, of course, shareholders. Shareholders are the first stakeholder that people usually think about. But then there's employees. There is the community in which the company operates. There's the government, because the government collects taxes, so it's also interested in the success of the company. Those are the ones that very often are named and mentioned. But then, I try to expand the scope of a company's stakeholder analysis by including, first of all, nature, then also including stakeholders of stakeholders. So let's say, for instance, the spouses and families of employees, or I mentioned earlier the suppliers. So there's actually quite a large number of groups of people affected by the operations of a company. And so the stakeholder component evaluates to what extent the company sees its relationship with each stakeholder positively rather than merely not negatively. Okay? So,
Yeah.
in other words, do we believe that our stakeholders should also thrive through our company's success? Component 6 is the opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
contribute as a company to the social development of underprivileged people or communities. So, what am I talking here? How can we think of our products or services, whatever they are, and make it available to a larger group of people, increase their living standards, but at the same time that it makes sense for us in terms of profitability and in line with the company's strategy. We are coming to the second last
Mm-hmm.
component,
7.
which is paradigm. To what extent does the company seek out the principles of the new paradigm? What am I talking about here? There is the old paradigm. Paradigm could be rephrased as mindset. There's the old mindset that states that uh, the purpose of business is only profit maximization on a quarterly basis and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And the new mindset recognizes that business has a much, much larger role in society than just making the shareholders rich. And this new mindset is what I call the new paradigm. And this component essentially is a summary of the first 6 components. Okay? Because if you or the first 5 components essentially talk about aspects of the new paradigm, and then the 7th component assesses the mindset of the company by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come to the last one. So the second last one is the internal mindset. And then with the last component, we go into the world. I
Yeah.
call it leadership for peace. To what extent does the company show leadership for the values and principles and ideals that it believes in, which I summarize as peace?
You know what I love, Tilman, is both your background, the reference both to the old authors of business and to understand and to really connect business and peace. So, all of these 8 components are so essential that it's not only to do the less evil, just to maintain, but it's really to thrive, and it's serving both the company and humanity, which is it's really where we should be, right?
Companies are currently not recognized for their peace impact. Just think about your own day-to-day life. What gives you peace the most on a day-to-day basis? Most of the things that contribute to the peace of 8 billion people on a daily basis
Yeah.
are for-profit products or services. And that's why I argue that business is by far the biggest peacemaker in the world.
And the realization of this is comforting, I think.
Absolutely. It's
Mm.
it's empowering. If you find yourself in business context and you have this strong desire to do good, but you think that, oh, I'm just working in business,
Mm.
look for the positive impact you or your company actually generates. And I can help you to quantify that and to connect it to profits. So I
Mm.
think it's hugely liberating. Much of our world's progress and well-being and health and thriving is enabled by business. Of course, there's also tremendous negative impact. I'm not blind to that. If you keep looking for things to be less bad, we'll keep finding that. Versus looking for things how we can be more good, and then the negative part will over time transcend, I believe.
Mm. Thank you, Tilman. Thank you very much. I'm so happy we had this conversation. I invite you to comment, and we will make more episodes. And you can also see in the link in the description how you reach to Tilman, how you reach to me, future collaboration in the service of humanity. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you so much, Tilman.